There we go. Can you guys hear us online? Yes. Okay, we're going to try this again. So I'm just calling the meeting to order. That's all you missed, so we'll do that again. We have one bill hearing. I will open the hearing on House Bill 2154. And now that Natalie can hear us, we'll see what she has to tell us about this bill.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2154 allows school districts to equip school buses with stop arm cameras to detect illegal passing of school buses. Subsection A requires the State Department of Education to create policies and procedures to contract with a private vendor to install and operate stop signal arm cameras to capture violations of KSA 8-1556. That's the statute that prohibits the illegal passing of a school bus. The Board of Education of a school district would then have to adopt a resolution specifying the intent to work with that private vendor, and an agreement between the department and a private vendor would have to specify compensation owed to the vendor for the installation, operation, and maintenance of the cameras. And it would also have to contain data reporting requirements. Civil penalties collected pursuant to this new section would be remitted to the School Bus Safety and Education Fund, and money in that fund would be used to cover expenses for work by the vendor, verifying violations, and educating the public on the dangers of illegally passing school buses. Whenever a violation of KSA 8-1556 is detected by a camera, then that alleged violation would be forwarded to the Department of Education and reviewed and verified by a designated official working with the department. That designated official would be required to be a certified Kansas law enforcement officer or a retired law enforcement officer who is in good standing at the time. The designated official would have to review the recorded images, the location where the alleged violation occurred, an image of the vehicle involved, and an image of the registration plate of that vehicle, and then recorded images showing of violations of KSA 8-1556 would be prima facie evidence that a violation occurred. If the designated official who verifies the file determines that a violation occurred, then a notice of that violation would be issued by the department to the registered owner of the vehicle that is pictured in the recorded images. The notice would be sent to that vehicle owner's last known address within 14 calendar days of the violation, and it would have to include information collected and reviewed by the designated official, the amount that the civil penalty would be, the date by which the penalty has to be paid, a signed affidavit by the party who verified the violation, information advising the owner of the appeal process for the violation, and a warning listing additional penalties for failure to pay or to file an appeal in a timely manner. The civil penalty for a violation of this section would be $250. If the registered owner fails to pay that, then the Department of Education is authorized to inform the Division of Vehicles and instruct the division to require payment to the department at the time of registration, or they would be able to refuse to register the vehicle. The vehicle owner is presumed to be the driver in instances where there's a violation. The owner may contest that they were the driver by appealing the notice of violation within 15 business days. The defenses available to the owner are that the vehicle was stolen, the registration plate was stolen, the owner was already charged with an infraction for a violation of KSA 8-1556 for the same incident, or the owner no longer owned the vehicle at the time of the violation. Upon receipt of a contest from the owner, then the department would be required to investigate and either dismiss or confirm the violation. An owner may then pay the penalty or contest that again by requesting an administrative hearing. They would have to make that request within 15 days, and that hearing would be conducted pursuant to the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act. Recorded images would be released by the department or the private vendor to the registered owner, a court, or any person as directed by a court order or a law enforcement agency. Images that capture no violation would have to be retained for not longer than 28 business days and then would be required to be destroyed. Images that do capture a violation would be retained until the case is closed, and then they would be destroyed as well. Recorded images would not be subject to the Kansas Open Records Act. The department would have to make an annual report to the legislature on the total number of violations, the total number of notices issued, and the total amount and civil penalties that were collected. And the department would have to also publish that report on its website. And I can take any questions.
Natalie, Representative Carmichael with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the internet connection is a little bit unstable. So if I cut out, it's not because I'm not interested. We're just having a little technical difficulty. Ms. Scott, I've got a couple of questions, maybe 3 questions if I'm able to get away with it. They relate to page 3 of the bill. And at line 9, as you mentioned in your brief, there is a civil penalty of $250 associated with this, whatever it is. Does it matter how many offenses? So long as I'm just willing to pay $250, can I just continue to blow past school bus stop arms and just figure whenever I get caught?
Mr. Chairman, there is no escalation for multiple violations of the section. Of course, this civil penalty is kind of an alternative to the citation. If a law enforcement officer were to witness you in the commission of this offense, then they would cite you with a citation. So that's always possible. But there is no escalation of the civil penalty.
And because of our technical difficulties, you cut out a little bit, but I think I understand what you said. Do you happen to know what the penalty is for violation of KSA 8-1556, the existing statute? What does it cost me if I, get cited versus what's it going to cost me if I pay a $250 civil penalty?
Mr. Chairman, that would have been a good thing for me to have been prepared and looked up ahead of time, but give me a couple seconds and I will find that for you.
That's fine. I should have looked it up. I should have looked it up myself, but in addition to the monetary fine for violations of 8-1556, I think that's what's known as a moving violation. That means it counts against my driver's license record, can lead eventually to traffic school, suspension of my driver's license, etc., and sometimes have impacts on my insurance premium. But as far as I can tell, under this bill, there is no, it doesn't affect your driver's license, it doesn't affect your insurance, it's not even a violation, you just send in your $250 and go on down the road. Am I misunderstanding that?
Mr. Chairman, if the violation was detected pursuant to this stop arm camera, then it would be totally civil, nothing to do with the traffic code.
So there's no consequence in terms of points against my driver's license for moving violations under this bill. Instead, it would have to be a prosecution under the 8-1556.
Yes.
Is that correct?
And, yes. And Mr. Chairman, our trusty transportation revisor is listening, so he is assisting me. The first time violation for, if it's an actual violation of 8-1556 that is, where you get a citation by a law enforcement officer, the first violation is $315, and it does escalate up from there. I think it escalates
up to about 900 or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it goes to 750 and then to $1,000.
So no points on my driver's license, lower fine, no escalation under this bill. Then we have to turn to how this interacts with the criminal law. And at line 21 of page 3, there is a presumption that a registered owner is the driver responsible. And since that doesn't say conclusively presumed, I assume that means it is a rebuttable presumption, meaning I'm presumed to be the driver, but I can come in and prove that I'm not. Is that the way that works?
Mr. Chairman, in this, the way this bill would operate right now is the verified, or the person working with the department in charge of verifying those violations would just send you the civil penalty. There's no hearing on that, but then once you receive that civil penalty, you have the opportunity to appeal that. And one of the defenses to that would be that you were not driving the car at the time, but you would have to go ahead and submit that appeal. And then if you disagree with the appeal, you could then go to just follow the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act for purposes of appealing that decision.
The reason that I ask is at line 24, it says the registered owner of a vehicle may contest that such owner was the driver of the vehicle by appealing Administrative Procedures Act, as you indicate. But then if I look at the defenses available for the registered owner in line 27 include that. And then there's 4 different things here, but none of them are that I wasn't the driver. So I'm trying to figure out, are we creating something here where the registered owner is responsible, period? Or is it in fact a defense to say, my kid was driving, my wife was driving, my neighbor was driving, I don't know?
Mr. Chairman, that is not a listed defense unless you were to say the car was stolen by one of those people. The vehicle being stolen is a possible defense. But I believe, and this did come up last year in the hearing, that your recourse really would be to take the person who was driving to small claims court to try to be reimbursed for the penalty.
So as you interpret this, the proposed bill here, it is not a defense to say that somebody else was driving. Instead, I have to go sue somebody in small claims and somehow establish a tort cause of action or some other cause of action to get reimbursement from the driver. Honestly, I don't think that's what this says. Maybe you read it differently, but I don't see anything about that.
Well, and so the 4 defenses that are listed there in the statute, none of them are that you were not driving the car at the time that the violation happened. So that is not a listed statutory reason for appealing.
Yet at line 24, it says, I can contest that I was the owner, that the owner was the driver at line 24 and 25. And it seems to be just completely internally contradictory to me. Maybe no one else sees it that way. My question is rhetorical. Thank you for your help and thank you for your patience, Mr. Chairman.
Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Natalie, is there anything within this particular bill that preempts a criminal citation or a criminal proceeding if in fact one is appropriate?
Mr. Chairman, no. If a law enforcement officer were to feel that they could issue a citation pursuant to 81556, then they can go ahead and do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions for Natalie? Representative Wheeler?
Just to follow up to that, Natalie, if an officer observes and issues a citation, does that preclude the Department of Education to proceed against the driver in a administrative proceeding, or is that some sort of jeopardy? Can they get you both ways?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that there's anything that specifically precludes the department from issuing that civil penalty, but there is, if you do get a civil penalty and you have already been cited by a law enforcement officer, that is a defense to the civil penalty.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do not see any additional questions for Natalie. We will begin with proponents, and our first proponent is the chairman of the State Board of Education, Jim Porter. Thanks for crossing the street today.
So, thank you. It was a little treacherous. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, Mr. Chairman, and to admit that I am neither an attorney nor a law enforcement officer. I'm a retired school administrator. However, in my younger days, I did a little acting, and I feel like I'm in the theater of the round again. I'm going to be extremely brief and to tell you how we got here in the first place. Every year, the State Board of Education, for about the last 3 or 4 years, has received information from a one-day study that shows the number of people that have passed school buses, some on the right, some on 2-lane highways, some on 4-lane highways, and so this is in my testimony, and I'm not going to read it to you. There's nothing that irritates me more than people coming and reading what we have in front of us. And so at one time, about the second time we heard that, the comment was made, why are we just listening to this? It is a problem. Let's see if we can figure out some way to do something about it. So we put together a commission or a committee, and that was made up of all sorts of law enforcement officials from all across the state. It was made up of a few legislators. It was made up of a couple of us on the State Board of Education and other interested people, and they came up with this particular proposal or something very similar to this. Others are going to give you the statistics. I'm just going to say that is the reason we got here. We recognize that we have a serious problem. And when I testified last year about this time, I told you, fortunately, that Kansas had never had a fatality. Well, on September the 9th, in Abilene, Kansas, that changed. So it is a problem. I understand that there are concerns that have been expressed already, and my urge is that we either pass something or find an alternative that addresses the situation, because it is, in fact, treacherous for children, and it is happening many, many times every day. I'll answer questions at the appropriate time. Otherwise, I'm going to, I just wanted to lay the groundwork, and others will give you the thing. And there's some statistics in my written testimony. This is successful in about 5 or 6 other states.
Very good. Committee, I think I'm going to wait until the end of the proponents to do questions, and that way we have a better understanding of the reason why this legislation is being brought forward, and along with the vendor presentation, and then we'll go back for questions. So the next one is Jim Carlskent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee. I'm not new to this room. I am a former legislator. Many of you I worked with, and sat right over there in agriculture at 3:30 every day for, I think, the past 4 years. But today we're here for a different reason. Last year, I appeared in front of this committee with this nearly identical bill. I introduced the bill, and I was a proponent for it. And I'll have to say that the questions and concerns that I've already heard today already, we heard last year. We had started this last year, and then we had, right before COVID, we had to call this session because of COVID. You know, we met down in the old Supreme Court room and spent about an hour and a half, trying to work it out, but it never got out of committee, as you all well know. This bill is identical, nearly identical to last year's bill, only the addition of the fact that there is a certified law enforcement person that would review this. But the reason why we're here, it's because of safety for kids. Mr. Porter indicated that there was a girl that lost her life, a little girl outside of Abilene in September of this year. This is the first case. A 15-year-old girl was the driver of that car, and it's wrecked her life as well. In Kansas, the state of Kansas, State Department of Education, since 2013, has conducted one-day surveys in April. Now, last year in April, they didn't conduct it because of COVID. People weren't in school. But since 2013, on those on those days where they kept track, there was over 1,000 violations per day across Kansas. When you consider that there's over 180 days that kids get in school buses, think about the number of violations and the number of kids that are put in jeopardy. Now, we know that there is concerns, with respect to this. There was 20 people on the committee that Mr. Porter referred to earlier. Representative Prell and myself were on it, plus several other law enforcement officers, school superintendents as well. And we really worked to try to answer the questions that are coming up. Last year, I think a problem that we didn't address, I think could have helped us, was the fact that for you to see how the school bus cameras work and what happens. Today, we're going to take care of that because we do have one of the vendors that has volunteered to display it. So I don't want to take a great deal of time, but we're here to help kids. and we're here for the safety of kids. So without further delay, I'll close and turn it over to the others.
Thank you. Next on WebEx, we have Randall Collins.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, thank you. I started to get scared for a second. I'm going to brief down what I had submitted. I'm going to show an 18-second video clip that was recorded in October of 2019. And it's going to show a Sedgwick County Sheriff's deputy riding on one of our buses while being followed by other deputies waiting to catch stop arm violators. It was recorded by a member of the local media who happened to be covering the event for us. The bus was stopped at a regular bus stop on Rock Road near McConnell Air Force Base to pick up 2 students. You can clearly see that the stop arm is deployed, and watch in disbelief as 4 cars will pass this bus at speed without slowing down. Now, I was told I would have a button to share my screen. Share. Okay, do you see the video up?
No, not quite yet.
There we go. There we go. Now, do you see the deputy?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Okay, did everybody see that?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So thanks to the frantic efforts of the deputy on the bus relaying information to his colleagues, 4 motorists received citations that day, but we can't always have a deputy riding with us on the bus, and this kind of activity happens every day in Kansas. That is all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next person is also on WebEx, Rick Giefer.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. I won't be repetitive and read what you've already read. I do want to thank Mr. Carmichael. He brought up some very good points. I'm not here to tell anybody how to come up with a bill, but we need a solution to this problem. There's nothing more terrifying than for a bus driver to see a child that's almost struck by a car when this car runs a stop sign. Again, unless there's an officer sitting there to witness it, the cars, they go scot-free, and you just pray that nobody in the future does run over. I don't know, what the solution is, but I do like the idea of putting cameras in the stop arms. How that's all worked out, that's up to your committee. But I do want to thank you for addressing this, and hopefully there will be some type of a solution that comes out of this today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Next, staying on WebEx, is Lisa Riveros.
Good afternoon, Chairman Patton and members of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this topic. My name is Lisa, and I'm the Director of Transportation for Wichita Public Schools, and we definitely support the bill. It would allow us to extend safety to our bus stops, like everyone mentioned today. The illegal passing of school buses in Wichita creates immense safety concerns for our bus riders. And we want to do everything we can to decrease the chances of having another tragedy in Kansas, like it was mentioned already with the little girl in Abilene. I see firsthand the impact of illegal passing of our school buses. We are in a large urban area, and our buses travel many 4-lane streets. just like the video you saw on Rock Road. And just like that, many cars pass through our stop arms too. We have about 4,000 bus stops in Wichita, and we transport around 16,000 students. It is my priority to keep all 16,000 of those students safe at their bus stops every day. So the bus stop arm survey was mentioned already today, and we do that too. And each year, Wichita alone ends up with right around 400 violations. We have about 173 school days. So this means that we have almost 70,000 potential violations throughout the school year in Wichita Public Schools alone. And we know that at any time, one of these 70,000 reported violations could turn into a tragedy for a kid. So you may be asking, well, what are the school districts doing to help these things? And we've done several things. We've tried to address the issue through our social media posts and working with our local media on educating the public about the law. We've also partnered with the Wichita Police Department to provide locations and times that our bus drivers experience a large number of violations. And these measures do help, but just temporarily. They're like a Band-Aid. And soon after these measures go away, we continue to see many, many stop arm violators again. In my school district, we have 400 buses that cover about 2,100 stops over 150 square mile area. We deploy our stop arms about 8,000 times per day on those 4,000 stops. So this coverage is extensive, and basically our local police department doesn't have enough officers to devote to this giant effort. This is why the camera system recommended is ideal. With this system, every one of our bus stops can be monitored every day. So basically all 16,000 of my students could have an extra layer of safety and security each and every day. And to me, this would make a huge difference. In my opinion, citizens knowing that they will get a $250 ticket every time they do not obey the law and stop when that stop arm is engaged will act as the best deterrent. Motorists not stopping for school bus stop arms is scary. It's scary for our parents. It's scary for our bus drivers. It's just a scary thing. And of course, this issue isn't unique to Kansas. It has been at the center of school transportation discussions at every national conference I have been to over the last few years. And I'm proud that my state had the foresight to put together a committee to tackle this issue head on. This bill puts together the mechanisms for us to keep our kids more safe. My hope is that through the enactment of the bill, we will see a reduction in the number of violations. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for considering the lives of our children and for the work that you do for the betterment of our state.
Thank you. Next, we have Ed Klump.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on this very important topic. This bill is about preventing injuries and deaths to children. That's what this bill is all about. And the way we do that is reduce these violations. You've heard the huge numbers of these violations, and every one of those is a potential tragedy. So our goal in supporting this is to reduce those violations, thus reducing the risk of loss of life and serious injuries to our children through a better enforcement mechanism than we can provide today. You heard about the 7-year-old Abilene girl that died last year. I'm going to, in a minute, tell you about another case that I think you need to hear about. But in the news report in the Wichita Eagle, they cited 2 pieces of statistics that I thought were relevant for you to hear today, and I've got them in the kind of the center of the page on my testimony. Most fatalities involving students waiting or leaving the school bus occur in rural areas, which Kansas is ripe and rich for. And in the past 5 school years, 73% of the deaths on school buses, or because of cars passing stop school buses, were students aged 10 and under. So we're talking about very young children, much more vulnerable because they haven't learned all the responsibilities of crossing those streets. They rely on other people. And so it's a very important thing to look at. What I want to focus on, though, in my testimony, and you saw the video there, this is a very difficult violation to enforce in a hands-on law enforcement role. Most of you know I was on the Topeka Police Department. I spent 35 years on the police department. 5 of those years, might have been 6, I was supervisor in our traffic section. And to do one of these operations like you saw here takes a minimum of 3 officers. You got to have one on the bus, you got to have one ahead of the bus, you got to have one behind the bus to stop the cars. And that's at a minimum. And then you see 4 violators, you're only going to catch one of them in most cases. Sometimes they'll all 4 stop for you, but you don't count on that. So this is very difficult to do. And then you add to that, this violation, all these huge numbers that you've heard on these violations are occurring in a relatively short span of the day. You have a couple of hours in the morning. You have a smaller number going on around noon hour with the kindergarten kids. And then you've got another round in the evening. Unfortunately, in the morning and the evening is areas of our highest call load. And that makes it even more difficult to put together an operation like you saw in the video because of other responsibilities we have during those high call times. So there has to be a solution to this. And the solution that's worked in other states and has proven to be effective is the solution that we're presenting to you today. And we would encourage you to seriously consider it. We recognize that there are some hurdles here psychologically for us to get through. We realize that Kansas has never held a vehicle owner responsible for these types of violations. We don't do photographic speed enforcement in Kansas. We don't do photographic red light enforcement in Kansas. But we're talking about kids here. We're talking about saving kids' lives. And if ever there is a place to do this, I think this is the place to do it. The other case I want to talk to you about occurred in Indiana in October 30th of 2018. It was in a rural area, and there was a bus that had stopped to pick up kids adjacent to a mobile home park. There were 10 kids getting ready to board this bus. A pickup truck flew past this stopped bus with the stop arm out and struck several of the children, killing 3 of them, a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 11-year-old. In this case, the National Transportation Safety Board launched an investigation of this school bus accident, and they don't do a lot of those. But I want to read you what they said in their recommendations. And there was a series of recommendations, but I want to read this one to you. It says, to the states of, and it lists a whole string of states. Among those is, guess what? Kansas. Enact legislation to permit stop arm cameras on school buses to capture images and allow citations to be issued for illegal school bus passings based on the camera obtained information. That is the first, that's, I guess, the third recommendation that they made in their findings in this accident. I think we need to heed that warning. We saw last year that it can strike in Kansas. And I think this is an effective tool. It's used in other states. And with that, Mr. Chairman, we'll stand for questions when it's appropriate.
Thank you, sir. Next, back to WebEx, we have Jean Soulier.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm Jean Soulier. I'm CEO and founder of Bus Patrol. We're the most deployed stop arm enforcement technology in the world. And our technology works. We've objectively proven that we've been able to reduce violations between 25 and 30% year over year in any communities that we serve. And we do that really by instilling a reflex in people. And that reflex is the same reflex that we all feel when we're driving down the interstate and we see a patrol car. we immediately pump our brake. We do that first before looking at the speed, and then we look at the speed. And it's that very same reflex that Bus Patrol's been able to instill in the citizens of the communities we serve, who know that 100% of the buses are protected by the technology I'm going to show you all today. First I'll start off with the data. Every year, the National Association of State Directors of Pupil Transportation Services do a survey, which I've heard people testify today that they participate in. In 2019, 131,000 drivers across 39 states. And, oops, sorry, it's going a little fast. There we go. Almost 100,000 violations were detected on that one day. That is almost one violation per bus per day. When extrapolated across America, across the 180 days, the survey anticipates 17 million potential stop arm violations in America. I can tell you that pilots bus patrols done across the country paint an even bleaker picture. In East Meadow and Half Hollow Hills on Long Island, 1.5 violations per bus per day, double what the survey said. 4 violations per bus per day in Half Hollow Hills, 1.5 in Niagara Falls. The interesting statistic is a pilot we did in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I'd like to draw your attention to the traditional enforcement methodology used in the entire year of 2018. Police officers were able to capture 667 people across the entire year, across the entire state, across 16,380 school buses. On 2 school buses in 47 days in Allentown, we found 205 violations. This data really paints the picture to saying that automated enforcement for school bus is the most effective way to hold people accountable. In fact, it's the only way to mathematically do it. And it's really that when you apply it to everyone equally, to every school bus, that you're able to change behavior. As was already discussed in testimonies, that during Student Safety Week in 2018, that is when those 3 children were killed who also belonged to the same family in Indiana. 3 others were also killed that week across America, and 8 others were put in the hospital. And I'm very sorry that your community also suffered. And it's something that is terrible. It's something that I have to see in the industry I'm in. And we see it really across the country. And that's why, as was previously stated, the National Transportation Safety Board recommended that every state in America pass laws to enable programs like bus patrols. In fact, it's our technology that's cited in the report. The other key to this was to make sure that you shelter the schools, the municipalities, and law enforcement from costs. When you walk in a school bus today, it doesn't look much different than the one we walked in when we were kids. Our cars are like spaceships now. So we had to find an innovative way to make sure 100% of the buses were modernized with cloud-connected technology. And we did that by holding the drivers accountable who are carelessly putting children's lives at risk by passing stop school buses. 100% of programs deployed by Bus Patrol are funded uniquely from the fines generated from the program. Now let's get into technology. I'll introduce you to Ava. Ava is the artificial intelligence engine that we've built. She can cover up to 8 lanes of traffic in a variety of weather conditions, light conditions. Her plate capture technology has 4K in resolution, so she can see an offender's plate more clearly than most people watch movies at home. And all of it was built to be in a robust environment. A school bus vibrates a lot, it's humid. So you need to have robust technology to make sure it's working to protect the kids. This is Ava. You will see the top left, the amber light signal is detected. The cars are traveling, and she's smart enough to be able to know when the stop arms are deployed and automatically identifying vehicles that illegally pass the stop school bus. The automation that is provided through this technology is super important because it really allows bus drivers to focus on what's the most important thing, and that's the souls that they're carrying around in their bus. They can let the system do the work of enforcing traffic, and they can do the work of making sure the operating procedures are followed and that they're watching the road to make sure that they can notify children of any risks. The process is very simple. The bus rolls, does its stops as it's required to do. AVA identifies violations and then automatically builds evidence packages, which then get approved by your local law enforcement technicians. Once a ticket is approved, Bus Patrol takes over the mailing of that ticket, the printing and mailing of the ticket. Offenders actually get to go online and they get to see the video of their car passing a stopped school bus. We may not be taking points away from people, giving a civil violation to the owner of a car, but we are teaching them a lesson that hits their pocketbook, and a lesson that we show them with images. And our experience is that these images speak very loudly. 95% of people who view the ticket, the evidence against them, pay their ticket immediately online. Another 4% will pay within 60 days of viewing that video, and less than 1% contest the ticket. Everything is managed for our clients, our municipalities, our school districts, including call centers to educate drivers and all of the PSA campaigns, which are very important elements because education is about more than just issuing a ticket. It's about making sure that you plan your route safely, making sure that you execute them safely, train your drivers, and also train the kids. They play a role in their own safety. And so Bus Patrol has designed processes to make sure that that happens effectively. Another piece of information, which I think is the thing I'm most proud of, is that 98% of violators who get a ticket from Bus Patrol's platform don't get a second one. So if you ask me if these programs work, I can tell you emphatically yes. Yes, they do. In the first year, we're actually going to give you a portrait of just how bad this is in Kansas. And in the second year, we're going to show you just how effectively we've been able to curb that behavior and change driver behavior and educate your citizens to make sure that they're more aware of their responsibility in creating a safe journey for their children to and from school. And that is all I had.
Committee questions for anyone? Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the witnesses who presented testimony here today. And if I may, I'd like to direct some comments to the gallery over in the corner. At an earlier, not you, Mr. Jones. Earlier, when I came in, I made some comments. I had been rushed from a late hearing, didn't get lunch in, and didn't get this bill fully read. Having fully read it, I'm suffering from far less heartburn. You did mention, I think, Mr. Karslink, that this is the same bill that was presented last year. Was that to this committee?
Mr. Chair, yes, Mr. Representative Wheeler, it is the same bill, except for the exception of the certified law enforcement officer that was inserted into this bill.
And did it make it out last year?
No, it did not. It was, we actually had 2 hearings in this committee last year, but because the session was precluded due to COVID, we couldn't get it out. And there was a lot of questions that we weren't able to answer.
Well, forgive me, but I've noticed that this now is an administrative hearing that involves far less civil rights than earlier bills that I have seen. So I don't have as much heartburn. I would ask if somebody from the Department of, may I continue just briefly, from the Department of Education, of how do you foresee setting this up to hold the administrative hearings? Who would be hearing those? Mr. Klump?
Ed Klump with the Law Enforcement Associations. The bill is set up, Natalie can correct me if I'm wrong, but the bill is set up that it uses the Kansas administrative hearing process.
Yes, I understand that. We'll leave it set at that, okay? And one last thing, and I don't know that you can speak on behalf of, maybe 2 last things. of everybody here, but would you object to allowing the owner of the car to include in his specific defenses that he or she was not the driver of the car? Add a fifth? This is very vague, the way it is presented.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wheeler, we actually discussed that quite at length. And I think the difficulty is how do you frame that so that simply everybody just didn't come in and say, well, it wasn't me. And so if that kind of a provision were to be added, I think you would have to somehow have to include in that the requirement of identifying, well, then who? Not just it wasn't me, but actually provide information somehow that it was, the car was being used by a particular person.
I recognize the difficulties. And then lastly to Mr. Solier. Sir, I appreciated your presentation and I appreciate your company. In my area of the country in southwest Kansas, which is very remote and very rural, we have incidences of people passing school buses in the bar ditch on the right. Can this catch that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, we have loading side cameras, dash cameras, and those other cameras. So we can protect the entirety of the school bus.
That's very good news. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And sir, if I may, on the other question that you posed on, in other states, they've addressed the issue of the owner being able to transfer the liability of the ticket to, let's say, the person that was driving, as long as that person is willing to accept the penalty. So there are procedures that we've put in place to make sure that the right person pays. If that person doesn't accept to take the penalty in those jurisdictions, however, the owner is still liable for the penalty, and we've seen that be successful in that type of deployment. Just as a comment for the.
Thank you, sir. That's enlightening. Thank you, sir.
Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. One for Ms. Riveros. You had mentioned that, in the national conferences that you attend, that other states are also questioning how to control these violations. Is what's proposed in this bill similar to maybe what other states are also have implemented and finding effective?
Yes, sir. It absolutely is. At the forefront of conferences, we talk about the safety zone around school buses, and oftentimes that is the lead off to a conference with the keynote speaker. I've heard presentations from districts in Texas and also in Minnesota, and it is very, very similar to this. And they have been using the camera for some time already, and they are huge proponents of it.
If I could have one other question for Mr. Solier. I'm a little confused on some of the statistics you provided. One of your first slides was about reducing violations by 25 to 30%, but then later you said 98% of the first-time violators don't get a second ticket. Unless there's a lot of people in the area, it seems like they're inconsistent, but I'm sure you can explain it. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. So when you look at traffic patterns and the number of people that pass, that's the distinction, is that you're not going to get a lot of the tickets are going to come from different people. People who drive through those communities, people who are commuting to and from work. There's also new people who move into communities and people who move out. There are new drivers and drivers that leave. So the population moves. So what we do track is we're tracking everything from how many violations our system detects to how many evidence packages we're able to support a charge, and how many people violate the law more than once. So in operating this program, I can tell you that we've been operating in states across America since 2017. Across that entire time, those two statistics have held, and they are objectively true.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do just have a couple questions. I'm wondering, Mr., and I'm sorry, I can't read your name. It's so, but same one that's up right now. Are you the same private vendor that came last year to this committee through your testimony?
I did not testify last year, but I believe that Bus Patrol was represented at the committee last year, yes.
Okay. Okay, and then this might be for Mr. Carls Kent. So we said this bill is exactly the same as last. I brought my folder from last year, and the only difference I can see is the designated officer is different. So Representative Wheeler asked questions about the civil procedures, but it seems like it's the same as we had last year. Is that true?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chair and Representative, that is correct.
Okay, just one sec. Okay, okay, okay. And then, if I may, Chairman, my next question is for Mr. Klump. You had said that you got there were recommendations from somewhere. I may have misheard you, but you said this was the third recommendation. Did I hear you say that? Because you said, well, the first thing they said we should do is, and you said actually it's the third thing. What were the first two things?
The other recommendations, and this is the National Transportation Safety Board who conducted the investigation of the incident.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so the other things were directed towards NHTSA to do certain things. And there was recommendations to the Indiana Department of Education. There was recommendations to the National Association of State Directors of Pupil Transportation Services. There was recommendations to the International Association of Chiefs of Police, National Sheriff Association, National Association of School Resource Officers.
But you said it was the third thing. So
Well, it was out of all those recommendations, there was one recommendation that was directed at this program. Okay, so there's actually 12 recommendations they give, but that recommendation was the one that was directed at this type of enforcement to help prevent these kind of accidents.
Okay, so I'm sorry if I'm not understanding, but so having a camera similar to this was the third recommendation. What were the other things that they recommended besides having this kind of program? That's what I was trying to, that's what I was.
Page and a half of them.
Okay, well, do any of them have to do with, because, we all agree this is just a travesty, that this would happen and that our communities have to suffer this. So we want that behavior to stop. And my question is tickets, is that the best way for the behavior to stop? Or is there anything else we can do? And maybe in conjunction with this, but that's what I was getting at. What else did they recommend?
So thank you. I think I understand where you're trying to go now.
Thank you.
So some of the recommendations, and I need to kind of look at this because I didn't really study those before the hearing today. It talked about NHTSA looking at some of the technologies in the vehicles that are required. Those were the first two. To the Department of Ed, it talked about supplementing training programs for the transportation directors. It talked about other things to do with the school systems, handling of the bus routes and things like that.
Okay, it's fine. I just
so there are those things going on, and in our group that studied this and put this bill together, there was a lot of discussions about those things, and I can tell you in Kansas, there is a very strong effort, not only of educating the public on these violations, but also of working with the school boards and the transportation systems and improving their systems, talking about route design so it minimizes the exposure to the children and things like that. Those things are already going on in Kansas.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, just one last thing. So then my last question has to do with the fiscal note and the funding, and I'm a little bit confused. Do we know, and I don't know who this question should be aimed at, but do we know $250 per ticket, then what, the private vendor is going to take care of I think, sending out the tickets and all that kind of thing. But then what is the real cost of that, and what's, the profit? I mean, it's a private company. I suppose they don't have to tell us, but I'm just curious, a little more detail about those finances.
I think the representative from Bus Patrol could possibly identify this, but when we worked in the committee last year, we talked about 80% to go to the vendor, and then the other 20%.
Right. I remember that.
But the fiscal would be, there would probably be an FTE for the Department of Education would be required to do this after they hear from Bus Patrol. But Bus Patrol, would you care to comment on?
I'm happy to discuss the commercial framework that makes this all possible. Thank you for your question, Representative Humphreys. The way that this works essentially is Bus Patrol pays for 100% of the operating of the program. So everything from the equipment, the maintenance, the preparation of the evidence. We even reimburse our partners for any administrative costs that they may incur in approving the citations, and making the revenue share for our municipal partners net revenue to them. So from the very first day of the program, 100% of the fleets are covered. 100% of the operating expenses and capital investments that need to be made are made by Bus Patrol. Our partners enjoy a revenue stream that didn't exist before. So you're able to get cost certainty, safety certainty, most importantly, and there's never a chance at having an unfunded mandate or for a program to run a deficit ever. The risk is always exclusively on Bus Patrol, as all invoices that we provide to our clients are paid exclusively out of the revenues that are generated from the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Representative Humphreys, if I may, just a quick clarification on some of the recommendations that go into that we can do alongside this. When we know where violations are occurring, we're able to identify hotspots using the data. That gives important information to the school transportation officials to potentially move a stop or ensure that when the bus is stopped there, that children aren't crossing. So when you have 100% of the fleet available to you, you can also start to look at different areas in your community and then target your education campaigns, your signage, your social campaigns to educate the constituents. So Bus Patrol doesn't just issue tickets. We also help in building public service announcements. We use our advocacy platform online to be able to educate constituents, students, teachers, parents, and everyone throughout the life of the program, because you're right, you need to do more than just issue tickets to change behavior.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, add, Representative Humphrey, one of the things that the 20% will, I said it was an FTE, but that 20%, that person that will, their cost will come out of that 20%. It's not going to be an addition to the State Department of Education.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, a preliminary question of my good friend, I guess it's now Mr. If he had been a senator, I'd still call him Senator Carl Schmidt. And it's just a housekeeping thing. On our agenda, you are listed as being here on behalf of something called Legislative Services. Then it says you're here on behalf of USA-KS. And then it says you're here on behalf of KASB. Now, that means you're here on behalf, I guess, the Kansas Association of School Boards. But what are these other groups that you're representing today? Because I've got to prepare a bill brief and tell my client who you were and who you were from. Could you help me with that?
Yes, Representative Carmichael. I'm with the United School Administrators of Kansas. They represent professional organizations.
Gotcha.
That's who I'm with. Kansas Association of School Boards has endorsed this as well. That's on the letterhead. You'll notice a KSB is on it. They endorsed it. So.
Okay, well, I just want to report properly to my caucus. You are not testifying today on behalf of the Kansas Association of School Boards, or are you?
they have backed this bill. They have backed this legislation.
I understand, but are you here on their behalf or not?
Yes, I am.
Okay, then there's something called legislative services. What is that, so that I can make sure and let my caucus know?
Basically, that's a title, I guess you would call me a lobbyist. I've been called a lot of things, but lobbyist would be.
Okay. I'm clear now. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do have obviously some more substantive questions, Mr. Chairman. But like my friend, the representative from Garden City, I have substantially less heartburn with this bill than any version of this that I've seen before. I still have very serious problems with the idea of outsourcing law enforcement functions, essential law enforcement functions, to private industry, particularly in circumstances where I recognize that there's a lot of demands on law enforcement. But I know in my town, just down the street, 3 days a week, they have 3 officers devoted to speed enforcement during these very same prime time hours. And yet with children dying because of this and the huge problem that it is, they'd really rather seemingly write speeding tickets and instead of protecting kids' lives. And I wish I could get their attention, but my ultimate question is for Mr. I think Soleil, is it Soleil, however I say your name?
Yeah, Soulier. It's okay, sir.
Soleil, glad to meet you, Mr. Soleil.
Nice to meet you as well.
One of the other problems that I have had with prior bills, and it sounds like it's still a problem here, is that you're a for-profit private enterprise, I presume, true?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Even though you do good things, you're a business, you're here to make a profit.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Well, I have a problem with paying private enterprise, private companies a bounty on everybody that they can convict. In this instance, it's of a civil offense of some kind. So you told us that you take a cut and then you pay a cut of your money of what you collect over to others. What's the House's share? And what's the State Board of Education share? And how much do these systems cost? What kind of a capital investment do you have? Because there might be an incentive for a company certainly not like yours, but somebody who wasn't very ethical, to make a capital investment and then skew the game to try to make sure they write more tickets and therefore raise more revenue. So what's your cut on this, and how much does it cost to install this system?
Sure. I'll first I'll answer and it's a great question, sir, and it's one I do get often, as you can imagine. So
I thought you might.
so Bus Patrol does not approve a single ticket. Bus Patrol builds evidence packages and then puts those evidence packages in the hands of local law enforcement, who use their judgment as to whether the law was broken or not. So we do not have any control whatsoever on what needs to happen for approving a ticket. Therefore, and since we're only paid on collected ticket revenue, we also don't have any impact on whether people pay or not. So we're disassociated from the acts that actually generate the revenue outside of just delivering a service. The next piece I'll say, sir, is that and it was to the comment in my testimony, and that was, if you look at a school bus today and you walk on it and you look around, ask yourself the question, why hasn't it evolved? Well, it hasn't evolved because no one's spending money on investing in technology to move our kids. I was in the logistics business before, and I can tell you that the technology used to move our t-shirts is Star Wars compared to the Flintstone technology that we're relying on. So where the public sector benefits from this private sector partnership is ensuring that your buses, even in the most rural areas, get covered. Even they may never write a ticket ever in their lives. They may never even come close to breaking even over 5 years, but that's where the deaths are occurring. So as a business model, what I have done with my company is made sure that we do 100% coverage, and we don't just drop cameras in the most highly trafficked areas. And so the $10,000 of capital investment per bus that we're making across entire states are going to be not, I would say 20% of those buses are going to be high ticketing buses, and 80% of those are going to be what I view as my responsibility and contribution to safety. As I am a for-profit business, I need to create some social value to make that partnership make sense. Now, when we take the revenue splits, and they vary from state to state, 100% of the costs are bus patrols. It costs bus patrol, and I can give you kind of rough numbers, but roughly $100 per ticket to just operate. And now when we talk about, and it's capital and evidence building, we're not talking about replacement of cameras yet, because that's all on our back too. All of the data fees that go into doing this is all paid for by bus patrol as well. So we're taking on the lion's share of the risk and providing the net revenue to our partners, which is greater than that we get. So the bus patrol as a net revenue gets less than the municipalities, and bus patrol takes on 100% of the risk while covering 100% of your kids. So, sir, I can stand here in front of you with great confidence and pride in saying that although we are a for-profit company, we put safety first. Because if we didn't put safety first, I'd put cameras on 20% of your buses and avoid the other capital investments.
So then, with the chair's permission, you would contemplate that if the State Board of Education contracts with your company, that you will equip every public school bus in the state of Kansas with a camera?
Yes, sir.
Or multiple cameras? Now, does that also apply to the private contractors? For example, my school district they used to contract with Durham. They're now contracting, and I'm sorry, we've got people from transportation. I just can't remember their name. Do you put your equipment on privately owned buses where the school district is contracting with the bus company to hire the drivers, operate the buses, do all the work?
Yes, sir. In fact, the majority of our deployments do cover both private fleets and outsourced fleets.
So what you would, if we put this into law and they contracted with you, we're going to see every school bus that carries public school kids in Kansas is going to have this technology. That's your business model. And so then, in most direct answer to my question, what's your cut and what's the State Board of Education's cut? After you meet your capital expense, your operating expense, pay for this retired officer who's, I guess, an employee of the State Board of Education because they're not tied to you because you recognize that bias the game. What's the cut?
Well,
How much the school district get?
80-20, we pay 100% of the cost, but I don't know what the revenues are because I don't know what the ticket rates are. So if we're deploying on, call it 15,000 buses times 10,000, you can see the capital outlay without any guarantees of what tickets will be and a commitment to service that equipment over 5 years. So really the business proposition is one of having the private sector take on the risk and provide the safety to the public sector that it needs.
So it's an 80-20 split?
Correct. In the model for Kansas based on what's been suggested so far.
And is that 80-20 of the net after capital investment, maintenance costs, et cetera? Or is that just a $250 ticket, roughly 80% goes to you, 20% goes to the board?
Yes, and 100% of the costs, whether you incur them or I incur them, come out of our share.
I appreciate your question. One final thought, Mr. Chairman. If we do work this bill, I hope someone, and it won't be me, will take careful look at the language at the bottom of page 3 and the top of page 4 of the bill. I think we're buying a whole lot of litigation unless we clean this proposed statute up. So that's just my suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Or Mr. Carl Skent. I believe you have something to add to that last question.
One clarifying point. The school board, each school board within each school board of the district has it's their responsibility to agree to this. This isn't telling all school districts in the state of Kansas, you're going to have school cameras on your school buses. It's up to the school board to decide whether they want it or not.
Representative Owens.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Solier, God bless America and most likely Canada based on your last name.
I am Canadian, sir, yes.
Because this excites me, to be totally honest. My heartburn I had last year, I mean, it's amazing how heartburn's just going away here. But this is part of what makes our country great, right? Is we have a problem. The public sector is not finding the right solution and steps in, and here steps in the private sector to say, look, we have a solution. And by gosh, by the way, it's not going to cost you anything. I mean, to me, that's just incredible. I, like the previous representative, am very pro-life. And to me, this seems like a way that we can save lives. And to hear and to talk about some of these challenges, as you've laid this out, you and your company, through, I can't imagine the enormous amount of investment, have developed a product that solves a problem for states like ours, and it doesn't cost us anything. That's just fantastic. I don't know. I don't know any other way to say it. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for any of the proponents? Not see any. Committee, we actually do have, you have written proponent testimony from Wayne Burke, Glenn Supis, and Tracy Becker. Is there anyone else as a proponent? Not see anyone as a neutral conferee? What about an opponent? See any here or online? We'll close this hearing on House Bill 2154. Thank you, committee. This was a good discussion today. It's not sure where we end up yet, but I think we're making progress. So we'll continue to work on this over the next couple weeks and see if we can get something out of committee before the deadline. So thanks everybody working on this. Committee, that's it for today. I do have a list of bills though that we may be working tomorrow if you'd like to write those down. Okay. And Vice Chair Ralph just reminded me we do have a couple bills above the line tomorrow that are judiciary related. So if you're carrying those and you have any questions, let us know. The bills for tomorrow, which again, we may not get to all of them and they may not all be quite ready, but if they are and we can get to them, we will. The first is 2076. Second is 2093. The third is 2098. The fourth is 2125. I've lost count now. The fifth, I think, is 2127. The sixth would be 2152. And the last one, whatever number we're on, would be 2227. We'll see how we do and how we come along with some amendments that I think are really close. So we'll see where we are tomorrow. So thank you all. We'll see you all in the morning. We're adjourned.